We have three amazing people. I'm very excited about this. I'm not going to go on a long introduction. I'll let them do that. I really want them to talk. One thing I want to mention, Todd made sure I mentioned this. Originally, we asked Todd Miller to be a speaker, a keynote speaker. Because of scheduling conflicts, he couldn't do that, so I asked him to join the panel, and I'm going to give him a little bit more time. Not because he's more important or anything than any of the other folks, but I'm just going to give him a little extra time. I'll go ahead and introduce him now. He's a journalist, an investigative journalist, a writer. He posts to the Border Chronicles. He lives in Tucson. Been reporting on issues on the border for a long time. He's got 5 or 6 books out. Very good books. I recommend them if you want to learn more about what's going on. So that's Todd Miller. Dora Rodriguez will be our next panelist. She's a very good friend of mine, and she does amazing work. She helps so many people. You just cannot say no to Dora. If she asks for help, you do it, because she's got so much love. I worked with her building a playground in Sasabe, but I'll let her talk more about her story. She's Salvadoran, and again, I'll let her talk more about that. And then Robert Vivar, with the co-founder of Deported Veterans Advocacy Project, and it's ongoing. It's still a problem. And again, I'll let him talk about the deported veterans. Robert is not a veteran himself, but he's from a strong veteran family. Everybody in his family, he was deported, and he started working with the veterans in Tijuana. And a bunch of them are here. Hector, Lupita, Blanca, Jan, a lot of the deported veterans. It's hard to believe that this country actually deports veterans that honorably serve their country, but they do. And again, I know Robert will cover that a lot more. And so with that, I'll let Robert get going, and he can introduce himself. So it'll be Robert, Dora, and Todd, and hopefully Lulu. Oh, okay. Just in time. Your ears are burning. So this is Lulu today with School of America's Watch. I'm so glad she's here. I'm going to start with Robert, and then Dora. You want to go after Dora? Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. That's it.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
My name is Robert Vivar. I'm the Executive Director of Unified U.S. Deported Veterans Resource Center. We've got an office right across the border of San Diego, right by the Chaparral Port of Entry. It's a tiny little office. And the purpose of that office is to help veterans, intercept veterans that are being deported, to integrate into the community as productive members of the community, while helping them to be able to obtain the rightly earned VA benefits and connecting them with legal resources to be able to come back to the country that we're willing to die for. This office is also a national project of Veterans for Peace, the Deported Veteran Advocacy Project, which actually begun since back in right around 2016. At that time was when the issue of deported veterans was not really widespread known, up until the time that Veterans for Peace and a group of people by the names of Jan Ruman, Willie Haggard, Maurice Martin, Mike Tork,
George
Johnson.
we're going to get to George. We can't forget George. Michael McPherson and Jerry Condon, because of their support, because of their work, that started to put the name of deported veterans out there to gain support and awareness. It was the only veteran organization that showed interest in correcting the issue of deporting veterans. Not American Legion, not VFW, nobody. It was the organization that I have to say spearheaded the effort to put the name on the books of the issue of the injustice of deporting veterans. Legislation has been introduced left and right, some of it good, some of it not so good. One actually made it to the floor. It actually passed in the Congress, in the House of Representatives. It died out in the Senate because it didn't have any bipartisan support. Since then, legislation continues to be reintroduced. This year, we have not had legislation reintroduced in support of the Veteran Service and Recognition Act. This is something we're going to continue to push. And the reason part of it is that, again, we continue not to have any bipartisan support with it. We need support from the Republican side of the aisle to be able to really make any headway. However, there has been some progress in the last few years. On July 2nd, 2021, on direct orders from President Biden to the Secretary of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, and VA, a department was created under Homeland Security called the Immigrant Military Members and Veterans Initiative. The office in Tijuana Unified U.S. Deported Veterans Resource Center, Sergeant Barrios Memorial Chapter 182, was one of the key players when this initiative began to take place. We were given the opportunity to participate in the initial conversations that kicked off this particular initiative. Because of this initiative, 140 veterans and military family members have had the opportunity to come home. Good. Unfortunately, the majority of them are only out on humanitarian parole, which means it's a one-year parole. They're entitled to a work permit, but it has to be resubmitted every year. Not good. We got to continue fighting for that. Out of those 140, there's been only about maybe about 35% of them that have been able to gain their legal status, whether getting their legal residence back or being able to apply successfully for citizenship. The work, of course, continues. We do have several veterans that have been repatriated that at the moment we are continuing to work with to get post-conviction relief so that they will not be placed in the hands of ICE to be deported again, either by getting post-conviction relief or for applying for a state pardon. And one of those that we have pending for a state pardon happens to be my colleague and partner. Between him and I, we ran the office in Tijuana until we were both able to come back. We still run the office from afar and virtually. I go down there every once in a while. But Hector Lopez, who's here with us, needs all your support also. We need letters of recommendation to be submitted along with this pardon package. So, you can talk to Hector, get more information, or Shelly can provide you an email address where you can submit your letter. Right now, because of the present immigration climate that we're facing in Washington, the possibilities of many of our repatriated veterans that have a temporary one-year humanitarian parole are in the fear of being denied their re-parole, and many of them are in fear that at any moment that parole could be canceled on them, therefore creating an additional issue in them having to return back to their country of birth, in particular across the border to Mexico. That is one of the reasons why this office is so important to continue its operation when our veterans are forced to come back to Mexico. We need to be ready for them, to help them. It's the second time they're going to be taken away from the country that we're willing to die for. We are looking to step up our support. We are reorganizing our Deported Veteran Advocacy Project steering committee so that we can be able to handle the challenges and be able to keep that office open that is going to be so badly needed as we see our repatriated veterans having to come back to Mexico. We already had one that, because of fear and just out of fear that he would get picked up, placed in detention and deported, he self-deported. We need to be ready for them. We're working on being able to provide them medical care, which they're entitled to their benefits, except there's no medical care in Mexico where they can get. Foreign medical program is a joke. It doesn't work. It's very limited, but we're working on providing medical care with them. We have a chaplain that's a retired Army Lieutenant Colonel, served a couple of tours in Iraq, that is coming across. He's been connecting us with some folks in San Diego to provide medical care. We're connecting with the San Diego Health Department, who has collaborators on the Tijuana side, and we're creating a network of support for the medical part of it. But we need your support because we need to keep that office open. And again, that's part of why we're going to restructure the Deported Veteran Advocacy Project so that we can meet that challenge. In the same fashion, we have started to work very closely with some of our VFW and American Legion posts because they face some of the same challenges on this side of the border. Veterans with mental health, homelessness, and that is something that we're teaming up with several American Legion posts and also VFW posts, so that as they tackle the issue of veterans' mental health needs and homelessness, we can also work with them so that it can include also our veterans that have been repatriated. Short there, and I'm going to show you a quick video because I can talk forever, but I think that if we show you a little bit of the work that has been done out of that office, and also in great support of our San Diego VFP. Jan is a member of San Diego VFP, and through his leadership there at San Diego VFP and all the members of San Diego VFP, we've been very lucky, very fortunate in that operation. But also not only San Diego VFP, we've had a lot of help from Tucson VFP, Minneapolis, and of course National, and several other chapters. And I hope you know, I didn't miss you, but there's been other chapters that have really been supportive, and not only with our deported veteran projects. I'm going to talk in a couple of minutes about some of the migrant work that we've done also in Tijuana, Mexico, that has been supported by the DVAP project and also some of these chapters.
Ready?
Ready.
George.
Yeah.
There it is.
That gentleman was one of the first ones that returned through the program. Meeting with then Secretary of Homeland Security, Mayorkas. These gentlemen that you're seeing are veterans that were repatriated, and we were very fortunate to be able to meet.
Hang on a second. Something happened here.
Just got bumping. Sorry. You can avoid that.
Okay.
American Legion Post. The middle was my son. Roberto Segovia, Marine Corps veteran, deported to El Salvador. We're able to get him back. He's getting care here in Long Beach. VFW post, mural posters. Some of our attorneys from Immigrant Defenders Law Center, our office in Tijuana. Jason, gentleman that we were able to bring back, we were able to vacate the charge that got him deported. He is now a legal permanent resident. He just got his residence, and he also got his commercial driver's license. Christmas party in support of our San Diego VFP, our DVAP, American Legion, and VFW. There's Jason's documents with his charge vacated.
And he's a citizen now.
Wow.
U.S. citizen.
Yeah.
Some of our veterans that have died in exile. Last year we had 3 very close friends that died back to back, month after month, without proper medical care, waiting on a humanitarian parole to be able to be admitted to the U.S. to get the medical care that they deserve.
May I ask you to expand upon the outreach of the office in terms of not just Mexico, but global?
Sure. The reason that we chose to use Unified as our moniker, as our name, Unified U.S. Deported Veterans Resource Center, because we did not want to be limited to just helping veterans in the Tijuana area. But any veteran anywhere in the world that needs help, that needs support, we're going to do whatever we can to assist them. George Johnson. Presente. One of our repatriated veterans, the first one that was able to come back and get his citizenship, gave us a quote, and I thought it was very appropriate to mention about George Johnson. And reflecting, and this is a quote on George Johnson, he said, "George Johnson, an obnoxious, nasty, foul-mouthed grouch who loved his deported veterans so much, he went to go live amongst them in Tijuana." George Johnson. I was mentioning earlier that the office did not only cater to helping our deported veterans. During COVID, we saw at that time, or right prior to COVID, an influx of migrants, asylum seekers, people fleeing persecution from Central South America, from Haiti, from different parts of the world. Veterans for Peace immediately answered the call. San Diego Veterans for Peace, DVAP, National, several chapters answered the call. Some of the chapters even came down to Tijuana. At that time, I was still deported. I was still living in Tijuana. Came down to help us feed migrants there at the border, to clothe them, provide them blankets, a lot of support. Our office was very important during this period of time because we're right by the Chaparral Port of Entry, and during COVID, the Chaparral Port of Entry was the scene of a migrant encampment that rose all the way to 2,000 people living in very precarious conditions. About 700 of those were children. We were a very essential part of the support in obtaining tents, water, food, clothing to support this community. Because again, very precarious conditions. No running water, no electricity, nothing. And the call was answered. We done a little grain of support, but we were able to help them. We continue to support our community. We've been working with migrants that were being held in between the two border walls, supporting them. Migrants that were being street released, dumped out at transit stations. We were in support of them too. Migrants that were waiting at the airport, sometimes 2-3 days, without any support, without any food, without anything. We were helping them in there also. So now that we've been, repatriated, our work does not stop. It continues because the injustice to our communities continue. I want to show you now again, I can talk a lot, but if I show you a little bit of the work, it gives you a better picture, a better idea of what it was like. We're going to kind of show it, 7-minute video, but we're going to show you like maybe 3.5 minutes. That'll give you an idea. This was the scene of the Chaparral port of entry where that 2,000 migrants were camped out. That's where it starts.
Block from the office.
A block from the office.
You're gonna tell me when to cut.
I'll tell you when to cut. Some of our migrant shelters, that was the scene of the Chaparral. San Diego League of Women's Voters, also in support.
Have a shout out to Blanca and Lupita.
Yeah.
Right up here in front.
Migrants, when we were escorting them to the port of entry to be able to enter legally to state a case of persecution for asylum. During the period that we supported this community, we helped over 4,000 migrants to be presented to the port of entry that entered and received a humanitarian parole to be able to apply for an affirmative asylum case. That's Whiskey 8, the area on the border between the U.S. and Mexico where migrants were being held for Border Patrol to pick them up, to take them in for processing to state an asylum case. And as you can see, there was absolutely nothing in between the border walls. That's why we were there, humanitarian work to be able to take care of some of their needs. I also worked for the San Diego Episcopal Diocese. So we would get the diocese involved, get some of our clergy out there also to provide spiritual care.
Okay.
The flyers.
The flyer, okay.
I hope that gives you an idea of some of the work that has been done there at the border with our community. We're going to be here, of course, the rest of the day, tomorrow morning. So if you have any questions, feel free to come up and ask. Don't forget to check with Hector. Last, I want to invite you all. I'm also a board member of Friends of Friendship Park. We're an organization that prior to COVID was holding binational communion services on the U.S.-Mexico border. A pastor on the U.S. side, a pastor on the Mexico side, holding communion. But also the important part is that this was a place where families that had been torn apart by the broken immigration system could come together and be a family, refusing to sever those family ties. Our anniversary is coming up August 16. The theme is friendship across borders. And what we've been doing is reaching out to our friends in Canada, as well as Mexico, for cross-border events on August 16. So all along the Canadian and the Mexico border, we're going to have events in different points. You can go to our website for more information, sign up. It's going to be powerful. We have to debunk that narrative, that hate narrative that exists, that we're enemies between our three countries. And this is how we debunk it, showing the friendship that we are united. The people are united. We're not enemies. We're one people.
That's right.
Thank you. God bless you.
Let's hold the questions, please, until after everybody speaks, but don't forget, we'll get back to you. So thank you. All right, now, my very good friend, Dora Rodriguez. That's all I need to say. She can talk.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I'll try to speak a little loud. It is really my honor to be here as a Salvadorian who fled the Civil War in 1980, that fled for her life, and in the journey of the third attempt, lost 13 friends in the intense heat of Arizona in July 1980. We were left behind by the smugglers in 110, 120 degrees in the desert for 5 days. 13 of my friends, including 3 sisters, unaccompanied minors, 12, 14, and 16 died in that area. I am one of the survivors. And that tragedy has changed my life. It did change my life to be able to speak out for the injustices of this immigration system across the globe. Because this is not only our situation, this is globally. People is dying across this world, trying to seek protection, trying to seek a better life, trying to exercise their right. It is our right to find a better place in life.
Absolutely.
And we only exercise the right to encounter death. Women encounter rape. This government sent people, as my dear brother now in the fight is saying, people who were willing to die for this country, now back in their country with no resources. So this is not okay, as we know. But I want to extend my gratitude to each of you that since 1985, you were present in my country.
What is that?
Sorry.
Come on.
Yeah, it's off. It was an email. Sorry.
We're a forgiving crowd, that's cool. I am a forgiving one, so. So what I was saying is, that I am so honored and grateful to be among you guys, because I know you have devoted a big chunk of your life for justice, to protect people around the world, and especially in El Salvador, like Dora and her family. People that you never met, but I am one of them. The war in El Salvador lasted, as you know, 12 years, killing more than 75,000 people in my country, and also displaced 1 million or more. And I'm one part of those 1 million people that were displaced, leaving everything behind. See, we talk about forced migration, and forced migration is no fun. Forced migration separates families. It separates us from who we know, who we are, our identity, our language, our families. The hardest time for me was to say goodbye to my mother 3 times. But it was that, or she would have said goodbye to me forever in my country. So I want to show you a little PowerPoint that we have to show you the work that we do. We come from Tijuana, now in Arizona. My work that I do with our organization, it was in the beginning of the sanctuary movement. Many of you know. The sanctuary movement was pretty much sparked by the tragedy of us dying in the desert in 1980. And it still continues. And it's still the sanctuary towns or states have been attacked by this president. Not mine, but.
Not ours either.
No,
See, that's not
that's
ours.
right. I'm glad we agree on that one. So I'm going to show you a small PowerPoint just to give you an idea of what we do in Arizona, which I am so honored to be here next to Mike, who has been so supportive of us, and the Veterans for Peace, and the School of America's Watch. And this is really, we have to do this work together, and we must continue to do it together to make a change. You can. So this is in 1980, in July 5th of 1980, we just celebrated 45 years of my rescue and the rescue of my other 12 friends and the death of my friends in that area. So now, after 35 years, I was able to go and visit the site. One of a man who is also a veteran from Colombia, his name is Alvaro Enciso. He has a beautiful project in the desert of Arizona, putting crosses to pay respect to people who died crossing the desert, trying to find a better life. So Alvaro, in 2018, found the site, and now we have placed 13 crosses. But because it's a national park, these crosses might come down, because this doesn't matter for this government. What it matters is that we alter the land. That's what they told me not too long ago. So I'm so afraid that our crosses are not longer going to be in the site to pay respect. So in 2023, as we know that we had a large numbers of families coming from all over the world to our borderlands, and they were crossing between ports of entry, thousands of them. We supported them. But late in June of 2024, President Biden decided to put a new policy in place because we know elections were coming. He freaked out and he said, I gotta show that I am in control. So he put a policy that will deport every single one coming to our border entrance and asking for asylum if they were caught in between ports of entry. So we, in June 6th, were at the port of entry of Nogales, Sonora, and assisted in the first day of that policy that took place, more than 500 people, including children and women. This picture in here shows the cruelty of Border Patrol. People present, they don't run away. They were presenting to authorities, to Border Patrol, for the chance to tell their stories. Within an hour or two, these people was in the back in Mexico with nothing. They throw away all their belongings, everything. It doesn't matter if it's hot or freezing. Kids would have come in winter, just with a little t-shirt, trembling. They also take away their shoelaces, their belts, all the dignity is stripped down from them. And it hurts so much when you see a person walking this way, like the worst criminal, in shackles and in the hands. So that was the belongings for this little boy and his mother. And then they put their stuff in onion bags that they have in trash in the station. We fought for this to go away, but it never really happened. They continue to do this cruelty. So what happened is when people is arrested and sent back, even though they ask an agent, listen to my story, if you send me back home, I am gonna get killed. Like Dora did 45 years ago when the Civil War was ravaging our country. It didn't matter. 1% of the people asking for asylum were getting asylum. And it's the same story now. So people have to go through the desert. And what happened in the desert? People die. People die every day in our desert because of thirst, the environment, their feet. They don't have the appropriate shoes. And it doesn't matter if you're a very strong man, young man, the desert will take you.
It's a miserable death.
It's horrible. It's horrible. So this was what was happening in the Borderlands in the town of Sasabet, Arizona. We have about 22 miles east to west, right? And that beautiful wall had about 24 openings where people was coming in. But that damn beautiful wall costed more than $1 million a mile and drained the water from our border town. There is our sister border town. Drained their well for the water to build that. So we go along with other Samaritans and we go, Todd has been there so many times, just witnessing and providing aid for people who show up by hundreds. And we also feed dogs too. We're friendly to dogs. Yes. So that little blanket I found on Easter Sunday. We were at the very end of the border wall in a very cold morning where we encountered 3 men from Chad. Those 3 men didn't even speak the language. You could see them terrified in their eyes. They didn't know where they were. The smugglers had placed them in a place they didn't recognize. And in order to get out from the mountain, you have to walk probably days. And it's so steep and down. It's unforgiving. So, if many of you are not familiar with the death map, I encourage you to go to a website that is called Humane Borders. This organization, which I am so glad to be part of the board too, we put water tanks in the desert to prevent death, but we said water for all. Because guess what? Our people who does not like us, the vigilantes, they come and destroy the water tanks. Because they say that we are putting water for the cartels, for the rapists, for the people who's gonna come and vote for democracy. So they're nuts. So we encounter them and they're full in military gear. You know, we walk around with water bottles, but they have guns, they're scary. We can see their faces, their cameras in your face. And we are just a bunch of humanitarian aid people trying to help people out there in the desert, saving lives, right? So I encourage you to check Humane Borders. For today, the number of deaths that have been recovered by the examiner office in the area, just in Arizona alone, is almost 5,000 people. They have died. And this is since only been recorded since 2001. So imagine prior to that. So please check this out. Every red dot is a person that have died and have been found. So we have thousands that have not been found. So in 2015, after a lot of everybody in my country was called rapists and looters and people from shed holes, I decided to come out with my story because my story was hiding in my heart for many years. You know, we have to, those traumas, we hold them sometimes to keep us safe somehow. But in 2015, when I listened to that on television, I said, I have a story, and you're gonna see what we're gonna do with that story. because we have to speak out. We have to just bring awareness across the world, across this country. There's so many people that really have no idea who we are. And that's where we are right now. Because so many believe what was told and never went to find out the truth about who a person. I am a person first. Although for this government, I am an alien. And I said, no. My name is Dora Rodriguez. And then I am an immigrant. And then I am an asylum seeker. But I am a person first. And I claim it. So with family affair, we created Salvavision, which we've been so thankful and honored to Mike and Lulu and many of you who contributed so many times for our work. We had a resource center in a very small town of Sassafras, Sonora, where a beautiful playground was placed in there. It's a town of only 2,500 people, and it was destroyed by cartel war in 2023. So the resource center that we had in there to welcome people who being deported is now closed. But a dear friend who's now in heaven, Peter, what was his name? Your friend that helped us with the electricity.
Bob Phillips.
Bob Phillips.
Presented.
He really took it up himself and rewired the whole center so we will have electricity and air conditioning. And then all you guys put money for a playground for the community that after the war with the cartels is still standing strong. So thank you for that. So we always have smiles. We do a lot of kids camp. We do a lot of fun things for our families. We are supporting at this moment more than 300 people in the town of Tucson, Arizona, preventing our asylum seekers before many of these people cannot right now even feel safe to go to the food bank because they think they're going to be kidnapped by this government, and they will. So we are being present in courtrooms and ICE appointments, and we're being present in schools, and we tell them, you are not alone, we're here with you. So we do this kind of activities, and Lulu and I were just washing as many dishes that they could at Camp Hope this year. It was beautiful. So you can rest. I'm almost done, I promise. Yeah, Nick. Did I touch you this too?
No, it's
I
not you.
did the same thing. I did
It's not you. There we go. Oh, wait. See, now it's going on. There we go.
Yeah, so that was Thanksgiving in Tucson, Arizona last year. And then you can see Lulu back there helping. And you can, that's it. So now we have delegations of students because we gotta teach our kids. They are really, I keep telling them, you're not our future anymore, you're our present. You have to be present. And whatever you do, if you like music, art, they are really scared. They're carrying a big, heavy load because they don't know what their future holds on for them. So we've got to really motivate them and talk to them as much as we can. We're grandmas, we need to do the work. You're not grandma, if you have a neighbor that has children, talk to them with love and care and say, we are here and we've been there and we're gonna continue to be here. So we do a lot of delegations too with kids across the country. Okay. You can.
I know, it's very...
That's okay.
It's cranky.
That's okay. So you can volunteer with us. We have a table outside. You can take, a pamphlet or information, and more than happy to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time. It's one more, but I just released my memoir. I encourage you to check it out. It has some parts of the story that I was not able to tell for so many years. but it's an honor of my brothers and sisters that died in the desert, and it's an honor to every single one of you that continue to be present. Thank you so much.
Lulu with School of America's Watch.
Is the book here? Do you have some here?
I didn't bring any because they can get on time, but I have a bookmark with the information when you get it. It hasn't been.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Firstly, I give gratitude and praise to the Most High. To the one God of love, who weaves all life together across lands, cultures, and time. I give thanks to this beautiful earth, this beautiful land, this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan described it, suspended in a sunbeam. The fragile planet that holds all human history, every war, every birthday, every memory that we've ever known. Let's please take a brief moment to share a collective breath. Thank you, God, for this breath of life. We stand here, gathered in this 40th anniversary of Veterans for Peace, as witnesses to injustices, to wars, and to the suppression of life for profit. And we breathe, we continue, we walk, we organize, we move with the knowledge that another way is in fact possible. That something greater than the world's most powerful military exists. And it lives beyond every man-made border. In the words of Yassine Bey, in the end, we're all walking in the same direction. May we walk that path with peace, and may we work for justice and for the preservation of life during our brief time on this pale blue dot. I'm not a veteran, but I am pro-veteran and anti-war. I have a sticker proving it. I was counter-recruited at an ROTC event in high school. It was the first time I heard a different experience from veterans. I sat down with a crew. It was an empty table. Everything else was, freebies and militarism, just romanticized fashionable militarism. But I sat down with this crew, and for the first time, I heard veterans speak about physical and moral injuries of war. It was the first time I heard the term moral injury. They spoke about violence against women within the ranks, about don't ask, don't tell policies, about post-combat trauma, PTSD, and about losing their identity and military benefits when they spoke out against injustices. So I chose another path. A path shaped by veterans like you, survivors of war and torture, indigenous land defenders, academics, and faith leaders who dedicated their lives, their work, to ending war and preserving life. Today, I walk with School of the Americas Watch, with Mike Tork, with Dora, mi maestra. Our organization shifted focus in 2016 when we moved from Fort Benning, Georgia, to the US-Mexico border in Nogales, Arizona. 2016 was just the year after the first US Border Patrol agent was sent to Fort Benning, Georgia, to WINSEC, formerly known as SOA. It was the same military school dubbed School of the Assassins. We understood something essential, that the long-term effects of the Cold War in the hemisphere, of US interventions, and of the corporate bleeding of Latin America would soon come home. The result would be mass displacement of poor, black, brown, indigenous, and rural communities from Latin America. And that those displaced people, families, farmers, workers, youth, would eventually arrive at the US-Mexico border, searching for survival, for refuge, for labor, and life. We saw this in the migrant caravans from Central America in 2017, 2018, and so forth. The US is a global leader in mass incarceration. According to the Prison Policy Initiative, nearly 2 million people are currently confined across over 1,500 state prisons, about 100 federal prisons, over 3,000 local jails, over 1,200 juvenile detention centers, and over 200 immigrant and tribal jails, at an annual cost of at least $182 billion. At the same time, the US is the top global spender on military and defense. There are over 750 military bases worldwide and over 272 embassies and consulates securing US political priorities around the world. And of course, there are countless strategic outposts and missions. An economist, Michael Hudson, outlined in his book, Super Imperialism, that the US developed a post-World War II model of empire that relies on economic domination rather than military occupation. But today, and Todd Miller speaks about this, we see both converging. The US empire is now enforced not just through debt and the dollar, not just through US sanctions, but through border militarization, surveillance technologies, and mass human detention. And this borderland that was US-Mexico, historically understood as that, is expanding, and we know that to be true. I'm sure Todd will get into it, author of Empire and Borders. The US border is not confined to the Rio Grande. Rather, it's a global enforcement regime spreading throughout, and through diplomatic pressure, military partnerships, and technology outsourcing. We saw it with Programa Frontera Sur, in which Mexico-Guatemala was militarized to prevent the northward movement towards the US-Mexico border. We saw it in post-2009 coup in Honduras, when the US Border Patrol went down there to train Honduran military personnel on border enforcement strategies. Inside our own country right now, the federal jurisdiction has expanded to cover a 100-mile border enforcement zone, which includes maritime borders, the Great Lakes. This is where nearly 75% of the US population lives, while we're seeing ICE federal agents in Chicago, LA, New York, and so forth. Currently, these unidentifiable federal agents, heavily armed and shielded from oversight, are storming our parks like they did in MacArthur Park, hospitals, schools, churches, and our neighborhoods. And they're empowered by billions in funding. As you all know, the big, beautiful, bogus bullshit bill made way for $46.6 billion for the border wall, $45 billion for detention expansion, $30 billion for 10,000 new ICE agents, 266 new detention centers. This means that ICE wants 80,000 new beds. We're already leaders in mass incarceration, and it's about to expand. All of this feeding private prisons. Geo Group, Core Civic, the stocks are increasing and growing. And war waging against the most vulnerable of our communities, undocumented folks with the precarity of status. So what happens when we build 80,000 additional beds that need to be filled every day? When we militarize our cities and those beds aren't filled, when we deport, the logic of capitalism demands return on investment. So people become the commodity, and we know that. They're detained not because they pose a danger, but because the system demands their exploitation, and it is already happening. So what then happens when 80,000 beds need to be filled and there are no more migrants to fill them? Who will they come for next? Post 9/11, the US entered a new phase of governance. We saw the birth of Homeland Security. Under the Patriot Act, state surveillance became normalized. You all hear and have heard of Palantir Technologies. It's a major defense contractor for the CIA, NSA, and ICE. It builds software that processes vast biometric and location data sets. Our social medias, financial histories, our medical records are all up for grabs and for analysis, all in the name of national security. This is the back-end intelligence behind predictive policing, gang databases, and ICE raids that are currently happening. This year alone, Palantir stock surged over 480%. And just yesterday, it was named the 20th most valuable company in the US, proving that surveillance, capitalism, and state violence are deeply profitable. Eloy Detention Center is an example in Arizona, where there are no jobs in that area beyond this private prison. A March 2025 DOJ directive cited the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 to allow federal agents to enter homes without warrants, reviving the 18th century legal framework to justify 21st century authoritarianism. We saw the justification was about Venezuelan gang members, but what it creates is the space and opportunity for federal agents to go into homes, regardless of citizenship, regardless of status, with the justification.
No.
In practice, all of this manifests as racialized policing under the guise of national security. Realistically, they are not stopping the Irish migrant who overstayed his visa. They're going after people that are read as Black, Brown, Indigenous, as other. They are after our Hispanic, Latino, Latinx communities. This all fits within what Harsha Walia and Border and Rule described as the border industrial complex, increasing from the prison industrial complex. A global regime that manages human movement to maintain racial capitalism, criminalizing people who have already been displaced by war, by economic collapse, or climate disaster, often caused by the very nations now shutting their borders, including the US. Harsha Walia writes, "Migration is not the crisis, capitalism is." So we're witnessing the merging of immigration enforcement with domestic policing. ICE, CBP, military forces are moving to absorb all agencies. We already know the FBI, CIA have all deprioritized white collar crimes, and everyone is prioritizing immigrant detention and border enforcement. All of this operating outside accountability and with complete legal impunity. To be clear, this is not law enforcement, this is state terror. We saw some examples, a Vietnam veteran's father being detained, violently beaten by federal agents. We see medical staff in California that have been criminally charged for delaying ICE raids within their hospital rooms. Senator Alex Padilla of California was tackled for asking questions. And then we saw the federal government lie. The Supreme Court had a decision in 2020, Hernandez v. Mesa, which also guaranteed federal agents immunity in cross-border killings. Now, if you all have paper and pen, I highly recommend you write this down. This is ICE, their own data sets that you can visit. ICE.gov/detain/detention-management.
Say that again.
All right. ICE.gov/detain/detention /detain/detention-management. You'll be able to see it up on, there you go. So when you scroll all the way down, you will see 2025 fiscal year statistics. There you'll be able to see the breakdown of who is being arrested where, and you go deeper into the data that ICE is providing. And there is a section in this data set in which ICE identifies who is a threat and who is not. And according to this data, only 7% of current detainees are classified as high risk. 83% are deemed no threat level. And this is ICE's own data. Yet detention and deportation rates are climbing, and the rhetoric that you hear on the news points to something very differently. So the US continues to manufacture the need for this border enforcement, but also for illegal immigration, using foreign policy, trade deals, and climate inaction to force people out of their homelands. And it punishes those very people for arriving. The same government that tactically relied on undocumented labor for decades is now engineering the mass incarceration and removal of our most vulnerable population. Now, I'll wrap up with this. Michelle Alexander authored The New Jim Crow 15 years ago, in which she described mass incarceration as a means for creating second-class citizenship, particularly targeting Black men. Today, the same logic is being applied to non-citizens who have no citizenship protection, thus creating a two-tier justice system where asylum seekers, migrants, are being held without bond, without trial, without due process or representation. Trump's 2025 current revocation of asylum bonds forces people to fight for their lives behind bars. How do you do this without representation? The 13th Amendment abolished slavery, except as a punishment for a crime. It is still legally permissible for prison labor to operate within the US. This creates the infrastructure for perpetual exploitation. So as we expand detention facilities, incarcerated bodies become necessary resource, a necessary commodity to justify budgets, profits, and political agendas. The risk of labor exploitation of migrant prisoners can be the next step. This isn't about safety, and it is all about control, profit, fear. It is a logic of racism and of empire, of imperial expansion. Politicians are weaponizing migration to divide us, to distract us from billionaires and corporations extracting wealth, violating our human rights, and destabilizing this country and the planet through war. The future we're heading toward, with high-risk surveillance, with high-tech surveillance, detention and deportation camps, continued labor exploitation, and impunity for state violence, isn't completely inevitable, but our resistance is critical. All of these are policy choices rooted in capitalism, empire, and racism. But I, like you all, and the organizations that we represent, and the communities we come from, we choose a different way. Just like I didn't choose the army, I chose a different way. I chose peace, and you all chose peace. So we collectively denounce war abroad and war at home, war against our neighbors. We denounce it. We believe in a future where borders don't divide us, but where solidarity transcends walls, where safety isn't militarized but grounded in justice and human dignity. Let us learn from history, California Prop 187, and the backlash, where we saw California turn on Republicans. And Democrats don't have the answers either. It is critical that our communities continue to stand up and say, not in our name. We are rising again and again, not to defend this empire, not to defend militarization, but to abolish it. I thank you all, and I urge us to continue working together towards peace. Gracias.
And now, the final panelist will be Todd Miller. So I know we're running a little late, but it's all good.
Started late.
Thank you. We started late. That's right, Ellen. Thank you. Thanks for your patience, and we'll have some questions afterwards. Go ahead, Todd. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, I'm very honored to be here. I've been inspired by Veterans for Peace for now decades. So it's my honor to be here, and really, I have a lot of tough acts to follow. I think I'm probably just going to be piggybacking off a lot of what other people have said in my comments. I was originally thinking that I would be, trying to make sense, given the sense of what we're seeing day by day, every day on the news, coming from this iteration of the Trump administration, and that's what I'll do to a certain degree. But certainly Lulu touched on a lot of those things. So I'll just try to really just piggyback. Really, I don't know what the word is, but what Lulu was saying, and others, and Dora and Robert as well. But what I wanted to talk about was how this, given that broader view of how this could be happening, like looking at how it has been enabled, right? Enabled by a bipartisan border and immigration enforcement system, as well as a border industrial complex. I want to talk about the militarization, the decades-long process of militarization of the Borderlands, and how that is an act of war. I want to talk about how this militarization expands globally, as Lulu was mentioning in her comments. And I want to talk about, as inspired by you and your work, the importance of peacemaking. And so in 2023, and I'm a journalist, and I've written some, I write for the online publication called the Border Chronicle. And also, I've written several books looking at borders, both the US-Mexico border, but also generally and expansively. So in 2023, I was working on an article, and I was looking at the Biden administration and looking at what it was doing on the border, and I came across a number about the budget for the 2023 budget that surprised me. And this number was that the budget had gone up, and by budget I mean the Customs and Border Protection and Immigration and Customs Enforcement, CBP and ICE combined budget in 2023 had gone up $4 billion. It went up from 25 to approximately $29 billion. So that certainly caught my eye, because it hadn't gone up that much since the post 9/11 era with the Bush administration, George W. Bush administration. The Trump administration hadn't even accomplished that. So then I kept following that and noticing that it wasn't being covered, right? Instead, what we're hearing was, open borders, there's open borders. That was pretty much the mantra coming across, really from the right-wing media, but being picked up by the mainstream media as well. And in 2024, the last year of the Biden administration, it surged over $30 billion. And then while I was looking at that, I noticed that I started looking at the contracts that the Biden administration was giving out to the private industry and private companies. And the Biden administration was by far in the lead for the most contracts given to private industry ever by any president. So at the end, it turned out that was true. In the 4 years of Joe Biden, there was $32 billion worth of contracts given out to private industry, and that exceeded the second most, which was the Trump administration, the first iteration, that gave out $20 billion, and so by $12 billion. And that was approximately 22,000 contracts, so you could do the calculations of how many contracts that was per day. The top contractor of the Biden administration during those 4 years was a company called Deployed Resources. Deployed Resources, and when you go and look at the contracts, it's a lot about soft-sided facilities. Soft-sided facilities is a euphemism for detainment camp, tent camp, the very detention camps that the Trump administration would need in order to do the mass deportation campaign, that operation, I should say, that it has been talking about. So this is one example of lots of examples, of probably thousands of examples of how this bipartisan border system has been built up over decades. So if you go back to 1994, and I like to go to 1994 because that's the current strategy on the border, the prevention through deterrence strategy. People are probably familiar with Operation Gatekeeper, Operation Hold the Line, Operation Safeguard. In 1994, the budget was $1.5 billion for the border. There was about 4,000 Border Patrol agents. And now, as I just said, 2024, and now the budget inherited by the Trump administration in 2025 exceeds $30 billion, right? And so from 1994, it's gone from 1.5 billion to $30 billion. Very dramatic, unprecedented buildup over the last couple decades, 25 years, of what we see in the border and immigration enforcement. Never, ever before in the history have we seen such a dramatic increase. And so what has that resulted in? Well, instead of 4,000 Border Patrol agents, now there's between 20 and 21,000 Border Patrol agents. There's all kinds of technologies, from biometric systems, facial recognition, surveillance towers like the Elbit Systems, the Israeli company, as we speak of what's going on in Gaza right now, the Israeli company who has built over 50 integrated fixed towers in southern Arizona alone. That sort of technology that was tested out in the West Bank before, that was used in order to sell that technology to Customs and Border Protection. We have drone systems, also Elbit Systems has been involved in that, but another company from San Diego is the main drone provider, a company called General Atomics. And we also have robo-dogs, or robotic dogs, that I think people have seen that different police agencies have used. There's robotic dogs, that's one of the newest, these ground vehicles. So we have this massive influx, including the creation of ICE, right? ICE didn't exist until 2003 with the creation of the Department of Homeland Security. And this expansion in what Lulu was referring to as the 100-mile jurisdiction of border control, which uses the maritime borders. It covers 2/3 of the country, or the country's population, and it essentially turns it into a zone of exception, right? A zone of exception. As one CBP agent put it to me, or an official put it to me in Washington, we are exempt from the Fourth Amendment, meaning that you're right not to be searched nor seized, according to this particular official, and according to the practices that we've seen, they're exempt from, you can be searched or seized, as one example of what happens in these 100-mile jurisdictions. But now you could argue that this is even further than that with what we're seeing with ICE going in many different parts of the country. And I have to, for that the Trump administration right now could not do that, any of this, what we're seeing, without this massive bipartisan buildup.
Yep.
So the language around this has been really docile, right? Border security, probably one of the most nodded to terms yet inaccurate terms that that both sides of the line will just say yes to. But it obscures what it has been 2, 3, 4, 5 decades of militarization, and what I would say we should say more forcefully has been an act of war. An act of war that is based, the Pentagon was very much involved in the initial border strategy, the low intensity doctrine. There's a book by sociologist Timothy Dunn called The Militarization of the US-Mexico Border that goes pretty deeply into this. And then to what we're seeing now. Like, actually, I want to tell a little story. When in 2012, I was driving from Tucson, where I live, in Tucson, Arizona, to El Paso, and I went along the border. As I was driving, I was in New Mexico, on a small road, maybe about 5 miles from the border, when I came across strikers, combat vehicles that were stationed, pointed at the border, paired with U.S. Border Patrol agents in their green striped vehicles, one after the other, after the other, after the other. This was what it turned out to be. It was a joint task force operation, one of many, many that have been done over decades. One of the first ones that people probably are aware of, or probably not the first ones, but an earlier one was JTF 6, when that happened in 1996, when Marines who were dressed in desert camouflage killed a sheep herder named Estiel Hernandez, who is in Redford, in his town of Redford, Texas, while he was herding sheep. And then that goes over the years to now, the national defense areas that people probably have heard about, that the Trump administration is making the actual border itself, more specifically the Roosevelt Reservation, which is about 65 feet from the actual border line inland into a military bases. And so the pictures that of strikers, or the video footage that you might have seen, they're the same combat vehicles that I saw in 2012. And so the militarization of the border has been happening for a long time. And it's not only just the joint task force operations, it's the Border Patrol itself considers itself to be a hybrid police military unit. They call themselves paramilitary units, actually. I know that paramilitary refers to a number of different things, but I've heard public information officers who have talked with many from the U.S. Border Patrol call themselves paramilitary units. And when I searched, to the 2012 incident with the strikers, when I searched any sort of information about it, do you think I found anything? No, there was nothing. Not one report about the combat vehicles on the border. And unlike today, there's lots of reports. There was not one report about it, and I think that highlights one of the things about why I would consider, or put this as an act of war, and a war that is not a conventional war, and it's the deterrence war. It's the war that Dora was describing. People being forced to go by the way that the border militarization is deployed, that people go around that into desolate and isolated areas, and areas such as where I was with these strikers. So that oftentimes the war plays out in these areas where there are no cameras, there's nobody taking any footage of it, there's no journalists out there, and they just happen without anyone knowing. It's invisible. And the people who die crossing the border are often, as Dora was mentioning, are often just, you don't even think, there's Alvaro Enciso, the person that Dora was mentioning, who goes to different sites and puts up crosses to commemorate where people have died crossing the border. And I believe, the numbers are almost impossible, right? They're impossible to know how many people have died crossing the border. The latest estimate I've seen for the U.S.-Mexico border since the deterrence 1990s, the deterrence strategy, is about 10,000 as the low count. as a low count. So No More Deaths, the humanitarian aid organization No More Deaths, came out with a report saying they think it's 3 to 10 times more. 3 to 10 times more. And worldwide, the number is about 72,000, since 2014, according to the International Organization on Migration. And that number too, they say right out in the first sentence, is an undercount because it's impossible to know how many people are crossing borders everywhere across the world because it's clandestine. It's hard to know. So we have an invisible yet visible, very visible war, and it's not. And I want to go to the next point, which Lulu was also mentioning very eloquently, that the expansion, like the idea that it's just the U.S.-Mexico border is not true, right? We're looking at borders that it's spread all around the world. I would argue we're looking at a global border apparatus that the United States is very much involved with. I'd say one of the strategies of the United States is the deterrent strategy that you see on the U.S.-Mexico border and throughout in the country. And the other strategy is what I would call the externalization of the U.S. border across the world. And there are many examples of this. Probably 100 examples, because in over 100 countries has the United States been doing trainings and operations, creating border patrols, or helping other countries create the border patrols. And the first place that I went to as a journalist was the Dominican Republic-Haiti border. I went there in 2012, but in 2006, there was, what the United States does is send assessment teams comprised of Department of Homeland Security officials, like Customs and Border Protection officials. Like they went to Dominican Republic, they did an assessment, like a doctor, quote unquote, does an assessment of a patient, but of a border, and looking at the border of the standards, the US standards of a border. So in 2006, the United States went to the Dominican Republic. They decided that the border between the DR and Haiti was too porous. Now mind you, this, like Lulu also was mentioning, this externalization follows U.S. interests, right? It follows places where the United States interests, U.S. imperialism, you could say. And DR and Haiti is definitely not an exception to that. But the U.S., they came out with an assessment that said the DR's border was too porous. And then what happened was then the Dominican Republic put out a presidential decree, said we have to create a border patrol, brought in U.S. Border Patrol to do trainings, and next thing you know it, when I was there reporting in 2012, there was a mini U.S.-Mexico border with border guards sitting on their X's, one by one, doing the same thing, a deterrent strategy, but on the Haiti to DR border. For a book that I wrote, I went to many places around the world. Another one was the Jordan-Syrian border. At the Jordan-Syrian border, there was one, I always remember we were going towards the border with Syria, and I was with a person from Jordan who was rather mad about the border. They had closed the border. And I just talked to a major general who was in charge of the border operations for Jordan, and he was telling me how he was getting advice from a retired U.S. Border Patrol agent, how they had received money from the United States to build a surveillance system, that Raytheon Corporation got the money that were contracted to build the surveillance system, and then we were heading, and then the last thing he said was, oh, and we have the border guards are shooting at people at their knees. So I was thinking about as we were heading towards the border, and it was a kind of a dramatic moment, but I won't get into it right now. But it's just another example of how a sort of globalized war, and the United States is involved with it. One last thing I want to mention about that is the Mexican-Guatemalan border. That has been, as Lulu was mentioning too, the Frontera Sur program, that was also ramped up and recently, and you can see like decreases of people coming to the U.S.-Mexico border as a direct result of the ramping up of the border enforcement in southern Mexico under the tutelage and support again of the United States. So this expansion of the border, the U.S. goes hand in hand with the European Union, who is also doing this externalization, and Australia, and Israel is very involved, especially from the company perspective of supplying the technologies. And what you have is a global border apparatus of many different countries externalizing their borders loosely between the global north and global south, for lack of a better term at this moment, and upholding a world, a status quo world, a business as usual world of keeping at the risk of simplifying, where the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, determining who has and who does not have. I think that's why when I got the email from Mike about coming to do this talk, I actually said no at first, or I thought no, because I'm actually completely jet lagged right now. You might be able to tell, because I've been like overseas, and I was just getting back, and I said there's no way I could come here. But then I thought about Veterans for Peace, and the peacemaking that I've seen with my own eyes, from not my direct participation, but from my more just observation and being around Veterans for Peace people like John. I'm maybe some of you are familiar with John Miles.
Presented.
I marched behind John Miles so many times in Tucson events in southern Arizona. And so I thought about it more, and I said, shit, I'm just gonna make the trip. I'm just gonna do it. And so it's just an honor to be with everyone, including all the panelists. It's just an example of what the Zapatistas say, otro mundo es posible, right? Another world is possible. Another world, in fact, peacemaking, as far as I see, is like the active creation of this otro mundo, right? This other world. In my last, I just want to finalize with I'm working on another book right now, and it has to do with the river and the Rio Grande, and the border, back to the U.S.-Mexico border. And I just want to say one thing, like, there was something so obvious from writing this book about the border, the U.S.-Mexico border, and about, I would even say peacemaking, right? But what I learned, the river has taught me a lot, I should say, and I've been working on this for about 3 years. One of the things I've been doing is just sitting by the river a lot and just listening to the river. And one of many things that I've thought that have happened. One of the things is how could you have a border on a river, right? A river isn't a border. A river is a life-giving force. A river is if you look at the Rio Grande, the Rio Bravo, like the wild and free river, right, as it should be, as it is not now, unfortunately, but it should be. It's a life-giving force to the southwest, right? Like life grows on both, all around it, and it comes from a major tributary deep in Mexico. You talk about Rio Grande coming from the Rocky Mountains, but it also comes from deep in Mexico. The Rio Conchos is a huge tributary of the Rio Grande. And this river, which should be a life-giving force to all sides of the border, is actually militarized. If you go to El Paso, Juarez, if people have seen the polluted dribble of the Rio Grande through the militarized cement embankments and the Humvees that sit on the U.S. side and the rolling razor wire, it's like, damn, right? Yeah. And then the water itself is administered by the border. So now Mexico has to pay the United States for water debt. and like one of the most severe, was in one of the most severe droughts up until the last few weeks when it actually has rained a lot. Still in a drought, but there's been rain. And so I wonder, like, this last thought I have is, you know, it's a world, the water situation, who gets it, who doesn't. Of course, who doesn't get it, who loses? Mexico, right? Or the poor, I should say, the poor in Texas also lose. Who doesn't? Well, the powerful, right? So what about a world that isn't built on the deprivation of people, but on the flourishing of all people? And that's
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. I know we ran a little over, but that's okay. I do want to mention one thing. Well, first, thank you, Lulu. Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Dora. Thank you, Todd, so much. But Todd started something about 22 years ago. It was called the Immigrant Trail Walk.
Oh, didn't start it myself. I was just a part
You
of
and Rich?
Yeah.
They thought it'd only be a couple years. It starts in Sasabe, goes through that area that you saw the red dots to Tucson. A lot of people die there. They thought they'd only do it a few years and then people would become aware. But I think this was the 23rd year. Lulu, myself, and Kara were on it. It's 75 miles in the desert. It was serious. I thought it was really hard until I got in Camp Hope with 40 kids with Dora. That was a lot harder. Thank you, everybody.